Welcome back. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. That was an amazing segment. Thank you, Emily and Dr. Hayhoe. There is a lot more that we can do to fix it. Welcome to the Frontline Communities panel discussion. I wanted to have Dr. Bitsoi and Key joining us today, and I wanted them here to talk about some potential solutions, but also to talk about how climate change affects communities. One of the potential solutions that we say and that we advertise and we advocate for is the Green New Deal. However, at the March for Science, we don't think actually the Green New Deal is encompassing enough. And so something that we really want to talk about is how has climate change affected your community specifically? I'm going to let Key go first and then Dr. Bitsoi. And then what is something you would like to add to the Green New Deal if just make it better? So Key, I'll let you go first.
Word. I really appreciate being able to just speak and be part of this all day today. It's been really great and awesome just to hear the different voices. My name is Key. I use he, him pronouns. I'm based in New York. I'm a founding member of Black Lives Matter, as well as an organizer of People's Climate Movement, which did the huge climate march in 2014, and since then have been building on a lot of work. I think that like being a New Yorker and being in these times, there's a lot of different things that come to my mind, especially like as someone who's part of the frontline community, as I say. But when I hear that, I think about where I live, which is LES, the Lower East Side of New York, which is actually right there on the front lines of the East River. And so in 2016, Hurricane Sandy hit and devastated New York City. 2016, did I have that right?
Yeah.
I think so, right?
I think so. It's a few years ago.
Huge number, but it really ravaged the Lower East Side as a waterfront community based around the East River. And we go right down FDR. And so in response, the city did release this resiliency package. And what recently came up in our city council was what they're calling the East River Park Project. And it is a project that's going to actually cost $1.4 billion, which great, right? Invest in communities, invest in climate, invest in resiliency of these communities. But with that package also comes the demolition of millions of new park amenities that we've spent millions of dollars into. When I say millions, right? And so you're talking about playgrounds, you're talking about swing, you're talking about benches, you're talking about all these different things that the city has already spent millions of dollars on to now divest in over they just spent this money in there. Bulldozing almost 1,000 trees, and then burying the coast under 8 to 10 feet of landfill. And when they propose this project, the communities that they talk about are Stuytown, are Cooper Square. They don't talk about Alphabet City, which has a huge Black, Latino, and Chinese, right, community. We all live in public housing. And so I think like one of the things I think about is like not trying to take away the investments, not trying to object to resiliency projects, but like to demand that climate justice be fair and democratic, and like actually for the public benefit. And then as someone who practices abolition climate justice, I think that like that is something that's deeply missing from the Green New Deal, to actually talk about how do people escape these horrors that they face living in public housing. And we see all of the horrible conditions of our jails right now. In New York City, they spent $10 billion on a jail expansion plan. They just rolled back bail reforms. And so you're just seeing is increased incarcerated people who are like producing hand sanitizer that they don't have access to, who are, in New York City now being the workers who actually are doing the mass grave digging, right? And so I think about all these different connections and the impacts of divestment in our communities, and what will happen when the youth do not have access to parks and beaches and playgrounds when we're in the midst of the COVID, right? And so how do those conditions from being in a horrible condition then lead you to more criminalization of Black bodies, of brown bodies, and putting them into incarceration systems? And so I would like to just, briefly invite people to look into abolition and climate justice, which centers history, intersectional experiences, and forms of care, healing, and solidarity already practiced within grassroots groups rather than imposing expert plans from the outside. And I think that is a really key part. And so, yes, abolition, climate justice in a theory, and then think about in practice, which I'm pretty sure you guys have heard about the Green New Deal. I would also love for us to talk more about the Red Deal and how the Red Deal has really incorporated and thought about a lot of the Black abolitionist politic in that lens. So yeah, I can stop there. I can talk more and more about this, but I really hope that like we really look at connecting abolition to climate, and really looking at what that looks like to have a safe world, a more just world, and a world that benefits everybody. So yeah.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of science behind prison abolition and why we have to push for prison abolition and how we should restructure our justice system in general. With that, I'd like to give it over to Dr. Bitsoi, also a friend of March for Science. How has climate change affected your community, and what would you like to add to a Green New Deal to make it a truly just Green New Deal?
Sure, great questions. Thank you, Omar. Thank you to you and your team for organizing this. This is awesome. And I'd like to start by introducing myself in Navajo. Yate che limenyo li Bitsuinche. And I am a member of the Navajo Nation, and I represent a number of different organizations. I work with SACNIS, I work with March for Science, and I'm currently working as a director for the Diversity Collaborative at Fort Lewis College in Durango, Colorado, which is also a Native American serving non-tribal institution. And really to talk about climate change and the ways it's affecting Indigenous populations is something that we've always been able to adapt to. And with the current pandemic, yet that's another form of a natural and in some ways a community impacting epidemic and pandemic. And so we've been able to adapt through different situations, going from living in open range territories to living on reservations. And so the climate change is really impacting the way in which we are tending to our crops, our livestock, and our cornfields. Because of climate change, there are so many more droughts, and that's affecting traditional ways of food sources and knowing what to pick for medicine and nutrition and also for ceremonies. And so some of the presenters before talked about the impact on Inuit people, and there's an impact on Native Americans and Indigenous people and Alaska Natives in ways that we have to adapt. And so what I'd like to do now is pivot toward one of the presenters' comments on mentioning the importance of knowing where food comes from. And we are aware of where our traditional food sources come from, but we also have a dependence on preserved foods that we find in grocery stores because that's what we have to use to feed our families. And so this comes to cultural knowledge and language because we've lived off the land. We've always known what organic means. We've always known what free range means. And you find that in traditional gardens and cornfields throughout Turtle Island, throughout our Indigenous territories. But in order to sustain this knowledge, we have to have a cultural renaissance in language and culture. And so we really need to help our younger people and our future generations understand the importance of what language and culture is. And to sustain this kind of knowledge, we need to invest in our tribal colleges and universities. We need to invest in their traditional ecological knowledge programs. We need to invest in their language programs. And at Fort Lewis College, we are a Native American serving institution, and we're able to do that in various ways with our Native American and Alaska Native population. And so tapping into a traditional Navajo tenet of philosophy, and it is a concept of ta'huajit ego, which means my destiny depends on me. So we can tap back into our traditional knowledge bases through language, through ceremony, through prayer, through song, and so that we can really embody that concept of self-reliance. So our destinies depend on us. And so thank you again for inviting me to speak. And the last thing I'll ask you and all of our viewers today is that as Indigenous people, we are here. Do not view us in the historical sense. We are not museum relics. We've always been here, we are here, and we will always be here. And on that note, Protect Bear's ears. Yeah.
Love the shirt. Thank you so much, both of you. You're absolutely right. We do need to look at truly innovative solutions grounded in evidence-based policy, grounded in respecting each other's cultures, and listening to people who need to take the lead. Like frontline communities are the ones who are taking the lead. And we really need to listen and make sure that voices of frontline communities are heard and followed. You're absolutely here. You're absolutely loud and in charge. Lee, I know that you're very loud. You're part of us, and I'm looking forward to organizing you for years and years to come. Keith, same to you. Fantastic organizing with you. And honestly, it's great to sit in a meeting while you're across the room from me and watch you react. So both of them have shared a lot of resources that we've put on the WOBA app. Feel free to reach out to me or reach out to them, and we'll share more resources